Okay, so, first I'm going to say I've been talking a lot the last few days, so my voice is just shot. But I woke up in the middle of the night trying to fall back asleep, brain going all the places brains go when you just want to sleep and your brain doesn't want to go to sleep. And I kind of ended up with the idea of trying to make a Barbie dress based on Sweet Rose's PJ's dress from, I think, 1983. I'll put a screenshot from the commercial up here. There are clearer images on the internet, but they're not mine. I don't want to try to get permission. I don't want to use without permission, so this is from Mattel commercial. You can look it up and find out who made it. Anyway, so the dress has like ruffled tiers with curved edges that kind of overlap to look vaguely like a rose. And I wanted to try to recreate that. I have looked at other pictures online of the dress as well as my vague memories of it because I had it as a kid. Okay, basically I had it as a kid and then I got to the point where I thought, no more Barbies for me, I'm too grown up. So I gave them to my 10 years younger cousin. And like a month or so after I gave it to her, I thought, you know what? That would have been really cute with the lower layers cut off so it was a short and floofy dress. So what I'm going to do is going to be shorter. It's all going to be made out of the same cloth. The original dress was dark pink on top and light pink on the bottom. I don't have that many different kinds of satin. I do have the light pink, and I could make it all in light pink, but I'm not going to. I'm going to use this sort of streaky tie-dyed eyelet. Let's see if you can see. It has the holes in it the eyelet has. So I'm going to line it with this. And like I said, this is inspired by Sweet Rose's PJ's dress. It's not recreating it. Sweet Rose's PJ's dress has a, like, not quite strapless top. There are ribbon straps, but it's a very simple tube-type top with some darts in it. I'm probably going to do a more structured top than that just because that's more my style. I'll get there when I get there. And while I have a lot of this, I don't have as much of this. So the amount of this I have is what's going to determine the sizes of everything I cut out. So yeah, this video is an experiment in just bringing you along as I improvise my way through a doll dress, which I do a lot. So I don't know if this will help you, but maybe it'll reveal something about me. Okay, so in a vague possibility of other people recreating this, if they like it, I am going to use for the bodice a pattern that I have already shared. It is actually to make this shirt, which this is kind of based on the bodice pattern I normally use, but I think I'll be able to do this in a way that if I know I just said that this is not really to help you do something as much as it is to show my thought process, my creativity process, but I decided, maybe if I could do it this way, then somebody else could recreate it if they liked it. Maybe. Anyway, so this is the shirt pattern. I don't think I'm going to do a full shirt style like this. I'm going to, honestly, if I wanted to do it strapless, I probably could just cut the top off of that and then put some ribbon straps on. Like, it's not strapless, like the original dress wasn't strapless. I'm rambling. Anyway, I think what I'm going to do is going to really cut in the sides a bit so that it has really cut out shoulders instead of doing my normal shirts that will go all the way to the shoulders and have the cutout in the center. Anyway, so the first thing I'm going to do is figure out how to cut that from the lining, because I want to get that out of the way so I don't have to squeeze it out of whatever scraps I have left if I cut the skirt part first. Right, I know I haven't actually published that many videos of me sewing, because it's not something a lot of people are interested in seeing when I'm not sewing doll stuff. But I don't know if you've noticed, I'm doing this a lot. That's because most fabric, woven fabric, is slightly stretchy when you go from selvage to selvage, and when you go from top to bottom, it's not that stretchy. And it doesn't matter so much in dolls, but when you're making clothes for a human, getting that side-to-side stretch accounted for just does a lot for things fitting properly. I have watched a lot of videos of people who are new to sewing where they just put their fabric down and they cut it across the grain a lot, and then they finish it and they try it on. They say, this is a little tight and I don't know what I did wrong that's different from the other ones, and I'm pretty sure that what they probably did was they cut it across grain because they don't know about that subtle stretch. So that's just something that I do. I'm just, my shoes are making rude sounds. Those were my shoes, trust me. Okay, so I don't need the sleeve and I don't need the collar. Start with the front. I think I can get them out of this area. So this shirt, as it is made, goes pretty far down the hip. And that, you know what, that could be a cute way to do it. I was thinking originally of just cutting the shirt off below the waist level so it would be at the waist, but honestly, I think it's going to give a very 80s kind of silhouette. If I actually make this the full length of the shirt, because this is not long enough for that. So I will. See, this is, I am not doing anything out of the ordinary for the way that I approach my projects right now. I am always improvising as I go. So what I'm going to do is cut this out and make the changes on it at the shoulder and reflect that in the back, and then use those pieces cut out to cut the bodice from the pink. And you can see, yes, I only have 2 pins in it. I don't pin stuff a lot. I don't feel like I'm really that accurate when I sew. Static electricity. But, I mean, maybe I am more accurate, and just because I've been doing this for 30 years, I don't realize it. And yes, I am trying this time to actually talk to the camera as I record instead of doing a voiceover for the whole thing. Although I probably will do voiceover when I'm actually sewing. And this is a very synthetic, probably nylon. Not my favorite thing to work with, just because I don't like the way it behaves compared to a good, sturdy, natural fiber like cotton or silk. Right, so because I'm going to be editing this again, I'm going to keep it pinned so it doesn't come unfolded. I thought I had this all centered and squared up in the camera, but it looks like I'm way off center, so you might not even be able to see what I'm doing. Am I mumbling now? Can you even hear me? That's what I noticed a long time ago. The farther away from me the camera is, the more I project. And yes, the way I have this pinned, it is spreading the dart out a little bit. But I do technically need a little bit of extra fabric around the hips on this, because it's going to have the many layers of the gathered skirt under it. I mean, right now my goal is to put it on this doll with the Made to Move body, But it might not fit her when I'm done. That's another thing about the way I sew. I have so many doll bodies that if I'm trying to make something for a particular doll and it doesn't end up fitting that doll, it will fit somebody. And I'm not going to be too upset about it, generally. Yeah, that's a mess. Alright. Like I said, though, I don't feel like I am generally super accurate when sewing, and maybe that has to do with what I just talked about, making something and it doesn't fit, but like I said, I don't stress about it, I just find somebody else that fits. Alright, that lined up, I see something even I need to trim. I'm trying to be encouraging, trying to say if you feel like you're not that great at sewing doll clothes, doesn't matter. Keep making stuff. Alright, now I need to get these shoulders lined up and trimmed evenly, so I'm going to get this pen. Alright, so now remember, you're going to be doing stuff with a seam allowance, so it's going to end up smaller. You don't want it too much. Let's see, it's not really. Alright, so I will put this to the side and cut out the front and back of the bodice after I figure out the skirt. Now I was looking at the pictures of the skirt. Someone actually, I think on an auction somewhere, had posted where you could see up inside the skirt. And this is kind of what I remembered from when I was a kid, the way it was constructed, is the lining fabric inside each petal of the skirt was shorter, so that drew the bottom edge of the skirt up inside to make it rounder and floofier. Let's see. When I was initially thinking of how I would do this, I was thinking that it was going to be like a circle, a whole series of circle skirt pieces. But then I actually looked at the doll, and I'm pretty sure it's just a straight piece that's gathered. So yeah, I think I'm going to use that for the width. Looks like it should be good. I mean, it's entirely possible I will finish this video and you will just be aghast at how slapdash I am when I make doll clothes, which is good. Like I said, I want people to realize I might be good at sewing doll clothes, but that doesn't mean I'm meticulous. Actually, I think I'm going to use this part instead of that part because, like I said, it needs to be shorter. Okay. So. Alright. Put these together a little bit just to keep them from sliding around. Alright, so I'm going to cut straight back here. Along this. Go ahead and cut this square off and then cut the curve after. I don't know, maybe I am keeping the patter up like I do when I'm dressing dolls. Just kind of explaining what I'm thinking with each thing that I do. Alright, so that's going to be a bit of an angle, so I'm going to look at that. I mean, I could take like a bottle cap and trace a perfect circle curve on this, but like I said, if I really wanted to take care, I would draft it in an image program, get everything super precise. Alright, so like I said, I want this to be shorter than the original. So I think two layers might be enough. And the way it works is the top layer is connected to the bodice directly. And then there's a layer of lining. I should go ahead and cut that. And then the next layer is gathered onto the lining. So I'm going to do the layer of lining. This rip. I love a fabric that rips. I can't remember if this will rip or not. Oh yeah, okay. That may seem violent, but it will always give you the straight of the grain this way. It's always going to rip between the threads. I mean, the top is obviously not on the grain because you can see the way it's coming unraveled like this. But again, just bringing you along for how I think. Alright, so if I do the, yeah, okay, I think I can get away with making the underlayer that width. Actually, it doesn't even need to be that much. Just a little bit. I mean, it would probably be optimum to cut it A-line, but then I'd need to do really more thinking than I want to. So we're going to just cut it. I don't know if it'll rip up. Oh, well, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pull a thread so I can see where to cut it at the top to be on grain. I have no idea if that shows up on camera, but there's a little bit that I can cut on from where I pulled that thread. You're not on camera in the least. Alright, now both edges of that are on grain, so I need to cut another like this, maybe a little wider if at all possible. There's a little bit of information on the selvage. This is probably vintage fabric. I don't know if crinkle lime green nylon is something that's really commonly found anymore. Alright, so what I'm going to do for the lower layer, so it can be a little bit wider than the top layer, the same width, length, whatever it is we're doing here. I'm going to rip two of these. And that is the problem with ripping, is you get loose threads everywhere. Also, when you're ripping a printed fabric, sometimes you will discover that the print is not printed on grain. So sometimes you do have to choose between whether you want something to be on grain or if you want the print to look good. Alright, so I'm going to use this piece that I cut before to cut the curve off of what I just ripped. I'm also going to, alright. Are we even? On screen, green nylon everywhere. Alright. So I'm cutting through all the layers. So they can be roughly the same. It's not perfect, like I said. Nothing I do is perfect. Alright, so I'm going to cut into this now using all the green pieces I just cut as the cutting pieces for this. So what do I want? Do I want to concentrate on the dark stuff, or I'll start with this piece since it's small, and small is easy to work with, and we'll center these eyelet holes that go all the way through so that the green will be sure to show up on the bodice. That makes sense, right? I mean, in theory, I could lay this out flat and use that to cut too, but I don't like cutting through single layers of fabric. I just find it unpleasant and it moves around too much. I'll do it if I have to. I am also very lazy in general when it comes to sewing. I mean, yes, I do love doing things like top stitching every single surface that could possibly be top stitched. But I don't feel like that's being particularly industrious. I just like top stitching. See, this is so thin, it's not fun to cut. I mean, that's part of the reason that most of my doll clothes are really made from nice, sturdy quilting cottons. Because it's less hassle for me. Like I said, you'd probably be amazed how lazy I am when it comes to these things. Like right now, I am too lazy to want to unfold all of this fabric to look for just the right spot. I'm just looking for something on the edge that looks like it could work. So I think I'm going to give up on the really dark streaky. Okay, no, we'll use that part. Not as dark, it's streaky, but it's kind of there. I don't know if the microphone is picking it up. My husband is down in the basement below me playing tabletop war games with a friend. The child is in the next room playing video games with headphones on. And I'm in here pretending like I'm not talking to myself. Yeah, I think part of the problem is my scissors need to be sharpened, even though they're still really sharp. They're the right kind of sharp. But I make do. Alright, now to figure out the skirts. Right, so I don't need to cut the lining piece is going to be on the inside. I need to cut the external parts that are longer than these. So let's get these apart. So I need an area that's a little wider. So like I said, the actual Sweet Rose's PJ dress, the lining was shorter. The roses were longer. The pink on the exterior is longer, so it got folded up the inside to make it a little extra poofy. I was thinking at one point when should have been going to sleep, how if Mattel was going to try to do this, an homage to Sweet Rose's PJ, which I don't know if they would. I know Sweet Rose's PJ was that iconic. Would you even get serging on the edge of the fabric? Or would it just be raw edged knit with nothing on it at all? Alright, let me reposition this. So the back should line up the same. And if anybody else wants to try to do this, I would love to see it. You don't have to credit me. I share my ideas because I want to, you know, on the off chance I might inspire somebody to try something. But this is obviously not an original idea because Mattel did it in 1983. I'm just riffing on it. Alright, so that's the same there. So. And if, like I said, if I were actually paying attention to things, I would measure this, but I am obviously just eyeballing it. However, this will make it easy. I will use this piece that I'm cutting now to cut the end of the other piece I need to cut. So it won't be eyeballing that. If it's wrong, it's going to be wrong on both of them. I would like to rip this, but unfortunately because of the eyelet embroidery, I don't think it would rip easily. Okay, so I need to find a either very wide piece of this pink streaky tie-dye stuff, or get to this point where I've found I've made a huge mistake. Alright, that looks like it's wide enough. Actually made a silly little apron out of this fabric before. This is my love of wearing layers. It's kind of like a kind of vaguely like a jumper at that point, in the American term of jumper. Alright, so I'm lining this green up roughly the green and the other one was. Rough pin. Alright, it's going to be a little short, but I think it should be within the seam allowance. Here. I am trying to encourage people to be, how do I say, to go into projects with less certainty of how they're going to turn out, because that's everything I do. I very seldom get the fully finished idea for a project in my mind before I start doing it. I generally look at the materials I have and let those speak to me. It's just, even this project is a little out of the ordinary for me because I had the idea beforehand that it should be like Sweet Rose's PJ, which means it should be pink. And then I started looking at my fabric and I have some light pink satin, but I don't think I would have had enough to do this. And also I've made a doll dress from it before and it is not really good for doll scale. Alright, so I will clean this up and then I will start sewing. Alright, I am still figuring out the best camera angle for sewing. Serena tried quite more over my shoulder here than usual. I don't know how helpful this is going to be. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is sew the darts and all the green parts. Which all this is going to be a little nerve-wracking because you gotta make sure that you are actually sewing the correct size together, because there's no print to show you what's the outside and what's the inside. And the way I sew darts, pin them, and I make sure the top pin is the same depth as the top of the dart on both sides. About a seam allowance. Oh yeah, I gotta remember. Since this is a pattern I made to share, it actually has a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I don't normally sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I normally sew with whatever it is from the distance from the needle to the edge of this narrow prong presser foot. Noisy neighbor truck. Alright, so since these are going to be aligned with each other, I need to get the dart marked the same. Does that make sense? And usual caveat, just because I've been doing this for a long time, and just because I actually had a college sewing course to, in theory, teach me the right ways to do things, and that doesn't mean I'm doing them what other people would consider right. I'm doing them the way that works for me. And if the way that works for me doesn't work for you, that is fine. Figure it out through trial and error what works. Like I said, this is the part where it's a little more challenging. You got to make sure you're actually doing these symmetrical and not ending up sewing them both the exact same way, because there's nothing showing you inside and outside. So I need to make sure it's still symmetrical. Alright. And also, just because it makes sense to me doesn't mean anybody else in the world will have any idea what I'm talking about. And I really don't know if a video is going to help. Alright, this is a little easier to tell right side from wrong side because the eyelet stitching is shinier on the right side. So fold it right side together. And one of these to get the top. And I start sewing from the top pin. That's why I make sure they're all in the same place, because it's my mark for where to start sewing. So there's a chance of the darts being even. They might not necessarily end up being even, but this gives them more of a chance to be even. Okay, I have white thread in my machine because why not? And now my arm is completely in the way. Alright, so I have this pin in here to mark where the top of the stitch is. However, because the pin is in, it's kind of shoving it in a little. So what I do is I lower the presser foot, I start lowering the machine needle, then I take the pin out, leaving everything in place, and then alright, like I said, I gotta remember this is 1/4 inch. And it sounds like I also need to oil my machine. Not gonna happen today. Oh, I still have that up really low. had the tension up high because I was stitching from the wrong side, and sometimes it gets grumpy. Technically, you're supposed to sew a dart to the point, start at the bottom and sew up, and even more technically, you're supposed to hand tie it instead of back stitching at the top. And sometimes I do that, but generally I'm just here to get an idea across and not to make something beautiful. And also note that when I'm finishing each of these, I'm not cutting it and pulling it out and having a really long thread tail. Because if you do that with doll sewing, quite often you literally end up, you quite literally end up with the thread tails being longer than the thing you just sewed. So when you're doing this is called chaining. When you sew something and then leave the thread uncut, don't pull it out much and start sewing the next thing. It's done a lot in patchwork. And you also know I love my patchwork. I actually did record a video of the patchwork shirt I made for Halloween this year, but I never finished editing it because I don't think people care as much about my human-sized sewing. Yeah, I'm going to re-sew this because it's way off. And that's another thing I talk about a lot in situations where people hear me talking about sewing, is sewing well. And, you know, I don't think I'm being boastful when I say that people think I sew well, especially doll clothes. Sewing well does not come from sewing things perfectly the first time. It comes from knowing how to fix your mistakes. And I do make a lot of mistakes. And not every mistake is worth fixing, but some mistakes you will be happier if you can fix them. Now I could immediately sew the other side, the other dart in the front, but then I would have to take it, and then I would chain onto this one, but then I would have to take this one off completely to sew it. I kind of think it's like a fun little challenge to figure out what order to sew things in, where I don't have to cut them and pull them off the machine with doll clothes. With human clothes, I don't worry. Because generally with human clothes, your seams that you're sewing are going to be longer than your thread tails. With doll clothes, not usually. If I really wanted to be attentive, I would make sure that these were all like ended at the same height and they look good enough. I'm not going to measure in too much. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and assemble the top before I move on to the skirt. And usually I am a little more attentive to cutting thread tails. and I think I've already forgotten in a few points that I need to sew 1/4 inch, but that might, I think I mentioned earlier that there is going to be the extra bulk added from all the skirt layers. So giving myself that extra width at the darts might help, but not the shoulders. So I just sewed the shoulders in the lining. I do have a trash can there. I'm not just throwing stuff on the floor. Although a lot of it ends up on the floor, I am aiming at the trash can. Sometimes I pin the seams, pin things when I sew them, sometimes I don't. It depends on my mood, depends on how annoying the fabric is. See, that's the first part with thread tail I've done, right? Alright, now I'm going to finger press the shoulders open. That's where you flatten your seam allowances. I'm not used to having fingernails this long. This is an experiment. And then you go over the seam allowances. Kind of scrape them with your fingernail. And that does get them flat enough that you don't have to go back to the ironing board constantly. So it's not that I don't press, I just don't press with the iron. Because if you are learning to sew, you will see people say you need to press at every seam. And that's very true. You need every seam to be flat after you sew it before you sew it to something else. Now, I have a habit of top stitching instead, but it's making it flat. Alright, now I'm going to sew the shell to the lining around the sleeves and around the neck. I will pin at the shoulder seams. Sewing machine sounds horrible. It's not really. It's that the end buzzes and my Angry Birds washi tape must not be doing its job holding it anymore. Sew that again. I got a little close. Like I said, I'm not used to sewing a 1/4 inch. something that I think another thing that people new to using a sewing machine might not realize is when you start your stitch, you need this, which you can't quite see, this take-up lever, which is down here now. I guess you really can't see it. You need the take-up lever to be all the way at the top of the cycle when you start a stitch. If not, it is just trying to overcome a whole lot of forces, and it's going to fight and buzz, and it might be just as likely to pull your thread back out of the needle. So if you started at the top, that's less likely to happen, and also you might get into the habit of holding the thread when you start it. I don't know if I even do that anymore. Yeah, it looks like I do. This is going to be tight. Okay. Alright, so the next thing you do before you turn it right side out is you need to clip all these curves. So another thing I'm not sure people new to sewing know about clipping. It's not superfluous. If you try to turn this inside out, you're gonna have this part which is shorter than this. It's gonna be on the inside trying to, it's the physics of it. You need to clip it. Which means cutting toward the thread, the seam that you just sewed, but not through it. And when you have curves going in the other direction, you notch it, because then when you turn those inside out, there's more seam allowance than curve. So if you notch it, those notches are taking fabric out and giving them room instead of bunching them up on themselves. I forever try to come up with a mnemonic so people could remember which way you clip and which way you notch. And I finally realized, well, you clip when the curve goes in, and there's an I in and an I in clip, and you notch when the curve goes out. And there's an O in out and an O in notch. But again, I don't know if that's going to make sense to anybody besides me. It's like the way my mom taught me to multiply by 9. Alright, now the questionable part. I gotta turn this right side out through the shoulders, and the shoulders are very narrow. Now our fabrics are very thin, so it might work. I knew that would be a problem, potential problem, with doing the shoulders this way, but I think that will give an 80s look with the narrow shoulders and the drop waist. Alright, so I got one side through. This is a bodkin. It's made for turning things inside out. It's also made for take you with thread, elastic through it and pulled through, but I broke that part of it. But still, I use it to turn doll clothes inside. Right side out, constantly. Alright, come on. You can do it. Without ripping anything. You can. You really can. You're nylon, you're synthetic, you're slippery. These are the things I think every time I do something like this. You can do it. It just might take some persuasion. Alright. So then roughly finger press those edges. think you could see, if you could see where I clipped all those curves, you would see them they'd spread apart from each other now, because that's the whole point of it. Alright, let's see. I guess if I want to keep it nice and clean inside, then I would spread this out and sew through those. But my waistline's not going to be clean at all, so I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it the lazy way. Which means from now on I treat both pieces as one. So I am pinning it right under the sleeve, pinning to the side just to keep those even. And then I put them together. Take one of the pins out and then put the other pin through all layers. And again, pin through all layers because there are way more layers than I usually deal with, and they're slippery. All right. Less than a quarter inch. And again, I need to give that a little extra space for the skirt volume. Alright, and let me make sure that I actually got everything caught in that seam. Alright, finger press it. And do that for the other side. If I had the right kind of setup, I would consider doing stuff like this live streaming, but I don't. My computer is over there, like 90 degrees away from me. You know, I don't really do smartphone. It's not in the budget. All right. Alright, there is the bodice. For now. I could check it against the doll, but I mean, that's a dangerous thing. Alright, now, I haven't thought this through all the way. Yeah, I think that's going to work. I think if we use the natural tendency of the bias to stretch, then we can work at that. Oh, I don't know. I did not think about... Alright, I think I need to do a gathering stitch, which means put that at the longest length. This up, pull the thread, just until these are the same. Now this is going to end up fluffy, whatever it does. Alright, yeah, now that is the same along that edge. See, it reaches all the way to the back now. Like I said, I don't have Sweet Rose's PJ's dress in front of me to see how it's actually made. I just looked at some eBay listings that were rudely upskirt. Alright, so that's back to the regular seam allowance, and I'm going to do this at my normal seam allowance because I haven't measured anything. Alright, so when you turn this right side out and line up at the top, yeah, it's offset. Alright, so move the basting stitch. And yeah, I keep basting threads. I keep gathering threads because they're usually good for other things eventually. Alright. So I'm going to do this to all the other pieces. And yes, technically I should be notching these corners, but I'm not going to. Like I said, that would give the curve, it wouldn't make it all rumpled up inside, would allow it to lay smooth, but since this curve is not actually on the edge of what we're doing, it's going to be fine. Alright, now I'm going to baste the tops of all of these together so they become, so I don't have to keep worrying about flipping and slipping stuff around. Then I'm going to gather the pieces. So I'm going to baste them from the back edge to the front. And see, that makes this natural fold where the front fabric completely conceals where the back fabric is, which is what I want. That does not have to be precise, it's just basting. Alright, now gathering. I have a secret. I mean, you saw the way I gathered the lower edges of that. It was a more traditional way to gather, where you run a loose thread through it and then you pull up on the thread. I generally actually don't do that. I use this thing. And I think this is a ruffler foot. I have been using it for like 17 or 18 years now. So I just kind of have a feel for how much the depth on this thing needs to be adjusted to get the ruffle roughly where I need it, and I'm not always right about it, but I'm close. You can continue to gather edges that have been ruffled after running them through the ruffler foot. They just start out ruffled. And I probably am making no sense. All right. See, that's gathered now. I think I'm going to overlap the front edges, so they're lining up with the darts. Now so the original dress had them lapped right over left, so I think I am going to do that. So that would be, I'll go ahead and line that up with the dart. Now you can see how much longer this is than that. I have two choices. I can leave it as it is and just cut off the excess, since, like I said, I have not measured anything, or I can draw this up so it becomes even more ruffled and fluffier, which is what I usually do with a ruffled project, where it doesn't end up just right. So I will go ahead and pin that. I'm assuming you can see what I'm doing. Alright, so I drew that up a little too much, so just loosen it. My husband is saying goodbye to his friends, so I might be stopping this for a while. I think the camera is zoomed in, so when it comes back, it might be zoomed out farther. But right now the plan is to, where's the other short one? Ruffle this and draw it in and line it up in here with that. So we'll see how far I can get on that before husband comes back up. Because I am hungry and would like to eat dinner, but I'm being polite and waiting for him. So when he comes up, I'm going to probably run out and say, hey, what are we having for dinner? I could have adjusted that so it ruffled more aggressively. Alright, so lining that up with the other dart. This is what I said earlier about how I should probably make an effort to give more room at the hip, because there are going to be so many layers of fabric. I didn't, so who knows what doll this will actually end up fitting. So I'm going to leave this on the basting stitch because I'm going to be sewing over this again. Right now, this just hold on.
Video.
Yeah, I'm going to go to stopping point. Hold on. So and that's where it is right now. And then I'm going to ruffle these and attach these to that after dinner. Okay, it is like 2 hours later. We had tacos. I bumped the camera, so I know it's not exactly what it was before, but I think I should be able to finish this. I think. So can I get So, like I said, what I need to do now is stop worrying about this, but I'm not going to. Alright. So what I need to do now is gather these and attach them to this. And then this will get gathered down a little bit and attached to that. And then we have to adjust its length, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Right now, we gotta do this. The ruffler works better when I increase the tension. I don't know if that's normal or just this weird 1980s Nechi sewing machine I have. Alright, together. Yeah, I think it'll be better to go toward. Go ahead and do the other one. Back to normal with that. I will actually be doing that back at a normal stitch. Alright, so it is my left on top, which means this one goes down first. Here is the center. Actually, I'm going to make an arbitrary point on each side of the center. Clip. And that's where I'm going to line the edges with. So I just need to pull that in a little bit to gather it. Again, I could just let it extend off of the end and not worry about being precise because I'm not going for precision. Now in the original Mattel dress, these were attached so that the gathered part was on top. I don't want to do that. I think it's probably a little easier for the mass-produced aspect. Right, where's my other clip? There it is. Yeah, I don't really like measuring stuff. If I can figure out where something gets placed purely by physical adjustments, like folding that in half and clipping a random clip on either side. Like my favorite way to place buttons is to use an expanding accordion sewing gauge. How far are the buttons apart from each other? I don't know. Whatever this thing says. I am trying to hurry so I can get this done tonight. Because this is supposed to be a silly project. I just added the complication of sharing it. actually going to sew it with this side up, because if I put this side down, it's gonna risk folding up and getting stitched weird. So I have it on a regular stitch. And yes, there are pins here. I sew very slowly when I get to them. Let's see if I hit it, it's not going to be horrible. And this is a risk I am knowingly taking. If you are not comfortable sewing over pins, then don't. And convincing myself I'm not sewing over them, I'm sewing past them. Alright, so I mean, you can baste things too if you don't want to pin them. That is perfectly acceptable and just fine. Alright. Yeah, see, that's the problem with sewing with this side up. Stuff can slip. Like I said, sewing good is not about never making mistakes. It's about how to deal with them. In this case, it's going to be just moving it and pinning it. And sewing it again. I think what I might do after I tack this in place is sew it again from the other direction with a deeper seam. I'm actually going to bother to put my seam gauge on to keep it even. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to serge this raw edge just because I can. Alright, so now I do have the option that I'm going to go ahead and take because I've mentioned I love top stitching. So I'm going to top stitch so this seam is up. And I sew very close by lining the edge with the inside of the straight stitch foot. So there is that. It's like if my sewing seems precise, it's just because I'm using smaller tools, I guess. Lining up with the inside of this foot instead of the outside of a normal corner. Alright, now I need to figure out if this is too long, so we'll line it up with that. Yeah, Yeah, see the green is going to just peek out, so I'm going to rip off an arbitrary amount of this. Random. Rip. And now it should be short enough to not be visible. Okay. So then I line this with all this stuff. I think I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to ruffle it a little bit. I try to always put my regular presser foot near or under the lid for the candy dish where I keep my presser feet, because if I put it someplace random, I will never see it again. That might be gathered too much. I keep forgetting we're not gathering this to waist size, we're gathering this to hip size. Oh yeah, that is gathered way too much. Fortunately, it's usually pretty easy to pull this out. Alright, so I need to make this a shallower gather. Alright, is that better? Well, first thing I need to do is this end got sewn over. Did you free that? Okay. Are you going to be enough? No. Okay. Like I said, I've been using that presser foot, the gathering foot, for like 17 years. And I kinda, actually, yeah, I still need to back that off to almost nothing. I mean, at this point, it probably would be easier just to put a regular basting stitch in and draw it up. But in theory, this keeps it more even. Alright, what do you do? That's close enough. I can finesse it to be a little bit longer. Alright, good enough. It's not even like I was just talking about, but I want this project over with. When I was a kid, my mom told me never, ever touch the tension on a sewing machine. Once you got it where it worked, it should stay in that exact same place forever. And now I know better and adjust it all the time. Alright. Personal preference, I like the seam allowances to be open, since that's just a basting stitch. It's fine to pick it apart. Yeah, I should have sewn it so the seam allowances are on side. Just to make it look a little nicer. Doesn't really matter. That's almost flat. That's good enough. Alright. It's so thick. Such a shreddy mess. I know the inside, it doesn't really matter how it looks. But alright, so again, I'm going to serge that. Oh no, wait. Have to pick that out and resew it because, like I said, with that side down, it can fold up on itself. I don't use a seam ripper. At college sewing class I took, the professor, instructor, I'm not sure what she was actually, I need to put extra glasses on, forbid us, the instructor forbid us to use a seam ripper. We had to learn to pick the thread out with a straight pin and scissors, and that's actually what I'm much more comfortable doing. It's just usually I'm not doing it on synthetic with a little tiny superfine yarns like this. Now I will serge that. Shreddy messy interior, somewhat tamed. I did not like it when all the bits came together. Okay, now I need to do back closure, and I am lazy and I'm going to use hook and loop tape. You can see some of the base and gathering threads there. Let me pick those out first. Actually, I might wait until I have the fasteners on to do it because I'm running out of card space. Alright, let's see if I can get up and get that without bonking the camera. Highly unlikely. Alright. Noisy trucks. Trim this off because it is so bulky. is much wider, low profile, thin hook and loop tape that I cut into narrower strips because that's what makes my brain happy. And I like to put the soft loop part on top so it's facing toward the doll body. That way if there's like tights or something under it that I'm putting this on over, it's less likely to snag. It's like a purely hypothetical issue. Again, that's what my brain likes. Alright, I am seriously not sure if my machine will be able to sew in this through this really, really thick area where all the ruffles come together at the waist. Alright, it's more likely it'll sew it if I just go. Nope. Alright. I know this isn't the strongest sewing machine. No, that doesn't look too bad. Okay. Alright, I'm leaving this in place, this straight pin, because it just gives me something to hold on to when I'm sewing this close to the edge. That's something I do a lot. I don't know if it's normal. Alright, now we're going to try to make another run for that thick part of the sides. Yeah, pretty much went through it. No problem in that direction. Alright. Looks okay from the outside. I mean, even if it didn't, I would just lament. I wouldn't do anything about it. Alright, and the hook tape goes on the other side, facing away from the body. And I could have done things to finish that edge easily, but, you know, I didn't. Alright. This side should be easier because it's not folded over, so there aren't quite as many layers. There are, in fact, half as many layers. Bunched up nice and inside. I don't care. I might be rushing too much. We got 15 minutes left on the card. I like to trim the edge next to lower Velcro. Well, it's not Velcro brand. Alright, okay. Now, I'm going to pin down the upper layer of Rose Floof skirt. And then we go right side together in the back, align edges, and I can actually play around a little with those because of the way they roll at the back. And then sew up as close as possible to hook loop tape. And I'm doing about a 1/4 inch seam right here. Getting close to being finished. Trim these. Just the outside of that bad. It is bad. Okay. Never mind. The underlayer shifted and it's not really even in the seam. Trying to do this without the extra glasses might be a problem. Because again, I'm running out of time. See, there's this hole here. I gotta, and yes, it would never be seen. It is underneath everything, but I don't want it. Alright, okay, so trim the thread, trim the thread, and then I like to, you see this corner where the edge of the seam allowance is at the bottom, I trim that at an angle so it ends up close to the stitching, that way it won't stick out once it's turned right side up. Right now I have so many threads to trim and get rid of, but it's nominally done, and I'll see if it fits the doll I want it to fit. If it does, you'll find out who it's on after I get this card emptied out and am able to record more video, which could be tomorrow. It'll probably be tomorrow, but hey, we got this far. So here it is. Someday I'll figure out how to aim things actually at the camera and not at the screen. Not quite as much foof in the back because it does have the back seam sewing everything down flat. So initially the bodice was a little looser than I wanted, so I repositioned the hook and loop tape on the bottom, did the hook tape on the back, moved it a little farther that way, so that snuggled it up a bit, and then I took it in just a little bit at the waist. It's not perfect, but it's fun, which is what I was going for. And this also gave me the push to finally try making this headpiece This is inspired by the cover of
Dolly Bird
15, which I didn't follow. I didn't even look at the instructions. I just saw what was on the cover and said, oh hey, I have stuff kind of like that. I can do something like that. So it's lace. Well, technically this is lace, but I cut it into individual pieces. And fake flowers sewn to some silk ribbon. All of this stuff is secondhand and thrifted because that's how I work. So that's it, and like I said, you saw her earlier. When I got into my fake flowers for doll size stash, I have a lot of these paper roses. I gave her a nice dozen roses. Of course, I will put actual pictures of her up on social media eventually. And so I can't say if the skirt turned out how I wanted it to or not, because like I said, I didn't really have a solid idea what I was doing. I had an idea how it would work, and that's what I tried, and that's what's going on. And if what I did makes sense to you and you want to try it, I would love to see it. Go for it. I share my ideas so other people can take them and run with them and do different, better, whatever than I do. That's what I like about the hobby, is sharing stuff. So yeah, obviously this video was more of an experiment of me showing you how I sew something and talking as I'm making it instead of trying to do a voiceover. And I mean, do you want to see more stuff like this, or was this just excruciating and you haven't even made it to the end? Or is this not the right kind of background noise for you when you're doing your doll stuff? Because, like I said, I want to share what I know. I want to show that the way I sew doll stuff might not be as exacting and meticulous as you think it is. And it turns out. So, yeah. Let me know what you think of the video, and I hope you like the dress as much as I liked making it.